And I don't think a tripod is really necessary in those situations. Now, there is one caveat to all that is that uh, a tripod makes you slow down. So if that works for you, pull out your tripod, set things up, and again, be contemplative, use that word again, be more mindful and deliberate about your photography. The tripod can really help with that. And that's something personally I need to work a little bit more on because I tend to be quite impulsive, and shoot very rapidly. So I think part of me says I need to slow down. So I not too long ago got a new tripod that I really like.
Yeah, tell us about that. What did you get?
It's a Sarai. I think that's how you say it. I always used to say Sarui, but I think it's Sarai tripod. Um, it's pretty lightweight. It What I like about it is that I can grab the twist style. I can grab all three of the twist things, extend all the legs, lock them in place very quickly. And it's waterproof. I don't know what waterproof means, but if you get sand and water into it, it doesn't. My old one, I could hear it grinding with the sand and stuff, and so it seems to function well. I like it. It's lightweight. I like the features. So we'll see. I'm going to try to use it more often than I have in the past to begin to try to slow down a little bit. But again, because of the way I shoot, I tend to move a lot and pick different perspectives. If I have to constantly be picking up my tripod, moving it around, adjusting it, you know, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It does help me slow down, but I also don't want it to be a hindrance for me seeking out different perspectives. So I think part of it is your own personal preferences and workflow and how you operate. But don't
Yeah.
think that you gotta have a tripod because I read someplace or saw in some YouTube video to get super sharp images. I got to shoot with a tripod. For us amateurs, I mean, again, if I'm a professional and blowing it up, the size of a wall, it's one thing. But for
Yeah.
most of this, we don't, it's fine. You can handhold it. Just be careful, you know,
Well,
adjust
it
the,
makes
you get a fast shutter speed, so on and so on.
yeah, it makes sense. I think it comes down to use case. If you're doing time lapse photography,
Mm,
long
mm,
shutter speeds,
mhm.
it makes perfect sense. If you're doing astrophotography, makes perfect sense. But the rest, you have to think about what you're looking at. Something you just said triggered a thought also. It's got to be ultra sharp. Um, I would ask people to think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
Anything can be ultra sharp and it can be boring as hell.
Oh, well.
It's character. It's sharpness is important based on what you're shooting and how you're shooting it. But something I'm getting back in touch with my photography work in film now is ultra sharp can become ultra clinical, cold. Um, there's a place for sharpness, like there's a place for using a tripod. But that's the beauty of photography. It's going to be different for each one of us, but you got to be honest with yourself about what you're looking for.
Well, and you made a good point. I mean, if it's a great composition, there's a lot of good elements going for it. I'm going to look past the sharpness, or
Oh, I like the way you said that. Yeah,
even some parts of it are out of focus or whatever. If it's a great composition, it's a great composition. You know,
there you go.
that's my feeling. Um, and one other thing I'll even say too, along this point is, they talk about panoramas, which I don't do a lot of.
Uh-huh.
But the other, people say, oh, you got to have a tripod to do a panorama. I've done tons of handheld panoramas. You know, Photoshop again, which Photoshop or Lightroom, which I use. as long as you take a wide shot, you overlap minimum 15% or more, it figures it out. It figures it out and it looks great. So you don't even need a tripod for panoramas. Yes, you probably get a little better results, and I do use it for that. But I've done a lot just handheld, just stand still, rotate your body. It works. It works. So digital is very forgiving.
Yeah, and a lot of cameras, digital cameras, have stitching capabilities actually on the
Oh,
chip in the camera, plus
yeah,
you got it in post-processing. Makes it
yeah,
easy.
yeah.
We're talking a lot about landscapes. Do you have any special tips for our viewers regarding shooting black and white landscapes in general?
Um, yeah. I mean, of course, I've talked about this already. I mentioned composition, and I think composition is king. Whether you're shooting black and white, whether you're shooting color, composition. Think about composition first. Um, I think that's so important because it doesn't matter whether it's color or black and white. If you don't have a good composition, I don't care. It doesn't really matter. So start with the composition. Um, you know, so the other thing I'd think about would be again understanding what the different colors will convert to when you convert the image to black and white. We talked about before with blues and greens and those kind of
Uh,
things.
yeah.
So you could have two completely different colors, but if they're the same luminosity and you convert that image to black and white, they're going to be the same shades of gray.
Yeah.
Yeah. So understand how that works. And I know you and I have had some conversations about the zone system that Ansel Adams developed and so on.
Yeah.
Um, so understanding about luminosity and shades of gray, the zones that Ansel refers to. You don't have to be a student of that, but understand what happens, when you take a picture of certain colors and what shades of gray that will translate to. That may or may not influence how you compose the picture, but it's important for you to understand that. It may make the difference of that's a picture not worth taking, or yeah, that's a good one, and I can manipulate that in post processing, like we talked before with some of the color channels, the sliders and such. So I think understanding how those tonal values translate when you convert it to monochrome. Um, and the other thing is, I think just trying to understand the kind of image that you want to create. You want dark and moody, which is stuff that I prefer. Do you want bright and you know um, landscapes, contrasty, whatever it might be? Try to
Yeah.
understand that and pick those scenes for you. And then, in post processing, work that to a point where you want to go to, I think. So I don't know. I think black and white does offer a unique opportunity. Color, we often talk about the golden hour and the blue hour being ideal times. And those are good for black and white too. But black and white has this unique opportunity, like during midday with the shadows and the harsh shadows and that, to do some really unique stuff. So you're not just limited to just the golden hour, the blue hour. There are some things during the middle of the day that potentially you can do. Not always, but
Yeah.
potentially.
Well, being a black and white photographer, for me, if I want a wide range of tonality, golden hour, blue hour is nice to shoot. If I'm
Oh yeah.
looking for contrast or, a real impactful, I'm out at high noon, brother. I'm
Oh yeah.
I'm out in bright sun. I'm looking for that because it gives a completely different feel. It's one of the things I love about black and white photography. It's, if I circle back to what you just said real quick, the the points that you raise for black and white landscapes, understanding composition. Composition is king, you said. I second that. There has to be an image there.
Right.
Understanding tonality. And one thing I'd add to that is for our viewers, if you're not familiar with it, Google color wheel. Looking at understanding color theory, oddly enough, is a great help for black and white photographers. What colors go together? Russ talked about it. An example came to mind. I was out 2 days ago during a break in the rains, and I saw this flower that I thought, wow, that would be a great macro shot. But then I thought about it. It was red with a yellow center. And black and white, that is going to be boring
Mhm.
because in tonalities, those two are part of the same color subgroup on a color wheel. So if you get a chance, check out color wheel and understand what colors are opposite of red. Whoa, that's going to give you contrast. What colors are complementary to red? That's going to reduce your contrast. Depends what you're shooting for. Speaking about color wheels, Russ, what's your thought on color wheel and black and white photography?
Well, Dave, you brought up an excellent point about different colors and understanding how they um, translate when you convert to monochrome, and I absolutely agree with all that. But I do think too it's important to understand there's different luminosities within each of those colors. So you could have a red, for example.
Yeah,
Sometimes we talk about a dark red or a light red, but we could have exactly the same color in terms of RGB, right? But then different luminosities on a scale. And of course, at the one extreme, it's white, the other extreme, it's black. But in between, there's all these different luminosities of that red. When we convert that to image to monochrome, it translates to a shade of gray. And it doesn't matter whether it's green or yellow or red or blue or whatever, it's going to convert to a gray, based on its luminosity. And so, in addition to understanding the color, what is the luminosity? And that's where we talked about those sliders before.
right.
At least in Lightroom, that's what you're adjusting is when I pick okay, the greens in my shot, I don't like those dark greens. That's my personal preference. I hate dark greens in a black and white, photo. I want them to be lighter. And so what I'll
Makes
do is
sense.
I'll change the luminosity. I'll make them, brighter. Okay. That's my dog in the back. So I'm changing the luminosity, which changes the brightness or the darkness of the gray, changes the gray scale, the tonality, you know, the shade of gray in that monochrome image.
One more question for you. Mike from Houston, Texas is curious.
Like, yeah.
Did your vision for the photograph we've been talking about remain constant throughout the process? Or did your vision change as the image started to become itself, started to reveal itself in post processing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So thanks, Mike. Yeah. My first response to that is, people talk about pre-visualization. And even in the case of black and white, people talk about seeing in black and white.
Yeah.
Um, if I'm going to be truthful, I don't do either of those things. I don't, except maybe in rare cases, I don't pre-visualize. I don't think about what the image is going to look like. again, I go back to composition and about this flash of perception that I have. I just, yeah, okay, that looks like a picture. I'm gonna take it. And I take it. And
Okay.
I don't think about, okay, this is what I want it to look like, or this is what it can or what it should look like. I just take it. Now there are some exceptions to that, but by and large, it's there. I take the image. Uh, in the case of black and white and seeing in black and white, I mean, people say that, and I know what they mean when they say that. But I see in color. I think in color. I don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody can see in black and white. Um, I can imagine what it looks like in black and white, and based on experience, um, I can kind of, again, kind of pre-visualize, maybe to use that word, what it will look like in black and white. And if I'm really curious on my camera, I can go to the in-camera editing tools and
Yeah.
preview it in monochrome, right? If I'm really curious. But most times I have a pretty decent idea what it will look like in black and white, whether it will be a good black and white or a lousy black and white or better in color. But I don't see in color, and I don't, or black and white rather. I don't see in black and white, and I don't really pre-visualize it. I just, again, it's based on the composition. That's a good composition. So, so that's kind of half of it. I take the picture, it's on the memory card, go back, upload it on my hard drive, open Lightroom, and this is the second half of the creative process. And so for me, it's very organic, and I just kind of go from there and I start playing with it. Sometimes I convert to black and white right away because I thought that's a black and white image. That's a great black and white image, and I convert it right away, and I go on. Sometimes I think, "Ah, that's kind of nice in color. There's some good colors, and I'm gonna play with it because I do color images. I don't
Yeah.
post a lot of Vero, um, but I do some stuff in color. So I might play with it in color a little bit. Um, Now, two things can happen there. I can stay with color, and I say, okay, that's a great color image, and we're done. Or I can say, I wonder what that looks like now in black and white. This particular image was one of those cases where I started processing in color because, there was some nice blues, there were some nice greens, yellows. It was a nice color image. And be honest, at first, it didn't strike me as a black and white image. It really didn't hit me as a black and white image. So
Ah.
I started down this color path, and I got about 80-90% of the way there. And then obviously something in my brain said, "Oh, well, I wonder what it looks like in black and white." So I hit the black and white button in Lightroom, and I went, "Oh, that doesn't look as bad as I thought it would." And then I went further, and then it became a black and white image.
So this image actually was a three-stop journey. First was the composition out of camera. Then came the color version of the out of camera shot.
Right,
And then there was this aha moment, and you arrived at the final version, which was black and white.
right.
So it's actually, yeah, it's a three-stop journey. That's it. Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
And it doesn't always happen that way for me.
Yeah.
Again, sometimes that's black and white. I know right away. Sometimes it's only color, not that often because I'm primarily a black and white guy. But once in a while, I start down this color path and then it becomes black and white. Now, also there's cases where it's like, oh, it looks pretty good color. It looks pretty good black and white. It looks pretty good in both. And sometimes I can't decide which one I like most. And that's okay. And that's okay. I'm
Yeah.
okay with, but again, I think 90%, 95% of what I do is black and white because that's what I like. But I get there in different ways. And so it's very organic. I don't pre-visualize it. It just happens. And again, I like to think about it again, there's two parts of the process, in capturing the photo, the composition, it's on the memory card. Yeah, the first half is done. Go back and I do the post-processing. Now it's the second half, and that's the second part of the creative process. And for me, that's the digital photography has really opened this door of this post-processing. And for me, it's great. I mean, again, maybe that's not for everybody. And again, you're going to more to film now, Dave, and 98% of it is in the camera. You know, you got
Yeah.
to get it right there. Maybe not quite 98, but most of it's there. Whereas digital, I see it's more of a 50-50 kind of a thing. Um, though some people, don't do a lot of post processing, and that's fine too. So
Yeah.
I think that's what's great about digital is you can do it to the extent that you want to do in post processing. If you want to take it straight out of camera, great. Okay. If you want to super manipulate it to death in post processing, that's great too. Not my shtick, but that's what's great about digital. There's so many um, opportunities, and it's very flexible.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, my journey is kind of backwards.
Yeah,
It was
retrograde.
digital, 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 and then being a dedicated black and white photographer, something clicked and said, I wonder if I still got that black and white film camera way back deep in the closet.
Yeah,
I went and pulled it out and threw some batteries in it, grabbed a quick roll of film and shot and said, reverse epiphany.
yeah.
I think this is something I want to do.
There you go.
It is
That's
not.
great.
It is not for everybody.
No, no, but
But
that's great.
what this has taught me is probably the single most important thing in my photography journey. Listen to the inner muse.
Yep, that's right.
There's a voice inside every photographer, I
That's
feel.
right. Yeah,
But
sure.
you got to listen to it. You got to find out where it lives and give it the chance to express itself. You and your photography may go to a whole new level.
That's right. That's right.
Russ, thank you so much. This has been great. I've
It's
learned a
been
lot.
great. Oh, me
I've got
too. Great.
homework. Any final thoughts you'd like to offer before we sign off?
Um, oh, wow, that's a really open question. I just again, thanks for the, opportunity here, Dave. Um, I think, photography, is a journey. I think a lot about, the creative spirit within all of us, and every one of us, whether a photographer or not, whether we're professional, amateur, we have a creative spirit. And I think, you talked about that, the muse. I think it's important for each of us to find that voice, figure out what it is that feeds that creative spirit, um, and take advantage of it, exercise it, feed it. There's no right or wrong. There's a creative spirit. And the process to me, the process of creating is more important than the product. More important than the picture you put on the wall or what you post to Vero, the likes, the features that you get on Vero or whatever. It's the process. And that, you know, if, I challenge anybody if they disagree with me on that, but I think that's the important part, for us as photographers is the creative process and figuring out what works for each of us to fulfill our spirit.
Well said. Thank you, Russ. And thank you to our viewers for stopping by and visiting the Black and White Bistro, the espresso of black and white photography. Have
Thanks,
a
Dave.
great weekend.